And good afternoon, everyone. My name is, for those who don't know, my name is Jen Bernstein, and I am the Advocacy Manager at National Council of Jewish Women, St. Louis. Welcome to our monthly Lunch and Learn. We are thrilled to have you today. Before we get started with our speaker, I do want to give you some information about a couple of things that are going on. Probably the most important thing right now is that we are encouraging everyone to help save Medicaid expansion in Missouri. Last year, we voted to implement Medicaid expansion in Missouri, and unfortunately, the House of Representatives is trying to stop that from happening in myriad ways, including the initiative petition process, but also by HJR 117, which is a bill that would effectively repeal our decision to expand Medicaid. If it passes, it will place a measure on the ballot for voters to consider that would allow the legislature to determine whether or not to fund Medicaid. And, you know, the 250,000 people who fall into the Medicaid gap will suffer. And it's just, you know, unconscionable that they're doing this. They're trying to overturn the will of the people and make it about them. So what we're trying to do is for encouraging people to contact their legislature and encouraging them. It is already passed out of committee. So you need to contact your own state representative and encourage them to vote no on HJR 117 when it comes up on the House floor. This will also be in the upcoming 5 Ways to Advocate that will be coming out on Monday. So keep your eyes open for that. And if you're not receiving that, please let me know and I will make sure that you do receive that every week. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that next month, our Lunch and Learn is on March 24th, which is the 4th Thursday. Usually it's on the 3rd Thursday, but because of quorum, we're scheduling it for the 4th Thursday. And it's going to be about the initiative petition process. It's been in place for 115 years in Missouri, and it allows citizens to put any issue on the ballot for a statewide vote. But lawmakers are trying to curtail the people's power by making it more difficult to put an initiative on the ballot. So we're having Ashton Coinel from the Missouri Sierra Club, and she's kind of an expert on this issue, and she will talk to us all about what's going on and how we can fight it. So hopefully you will join us then, and I think we'll go ahead and get started with this week's Lunch and Learn. So Nicole, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our speaker, and thank you again all so much for joining us today.
Okay, hi everybody. If you don't know me, my name is Nicole Gorowski, and I am the chairperson of these Lunch and Learns this year, and I apologize for missing the one that was last month. I actually fell and hurt myself, broke my foot, so I missed the very first one of the year, but here I am for the second one, and I'm really happy to introduce Javad Khazaeli. And Javad is not only my friend, but he is an absolute rock star. So Javad is the co-founder of Khazaeli Wyrsch, and obviously partner in that law firm. So it's a St. Louis-based law firm that works on civil rights and immigration and litigation issues. The Riverfront Times chose Javad as the best attorney in St. Louis last year, so that's pretty cool. And he gets awards in pro bono and public service as well. So soon after the September 11th attacks, Javad joined the Department of Justice, and he worked with a Joint Terrorism Task Force. He also worked with the Department of Labor, and his expertise is using immigration laws at that time to prosecute terrorists, financiers, which is not an easy word to say, and aliens engaged in espionage and other criminal acts. So I don't know if and now Javad is in private practice helping people get immigration status, and he's been published in the New York Times and in the Washington Post. Not sure there's anyone more qualified to speak about immigration, and I'm going to turn it over to Javad to talk to you guys today.
Thanks, Nicole. That was very generous. I hope everybody can hear me. I've got a little bit of chaos going on, so our family was supposed to fly to Orlando, Florida today at 5 for the kids to do Harry Potter World, and our flight got canceled, and we tried to get them there, and basically our only choice was to rent a car, and we're driving. So I'm currently in the middle of Illinois at a McDonald's, so hopefully my Wi-Fi holds up. I'm just going to jump right into this presentation. Give me 1 second to share my screen. and we will go ahead. So this presentation I call Immigration Law After Trump. And the reason that I start off with a Frankenstein on here is that the immigration codes of America is basically a Frankenstein law. Different sections have been added at different times over the years. Just the immigration code and regulations is 2,500 pages long. It's the second longest law in American history behind the tax code. Everybody likes to use Martin Luther King quotes to make him seem like he was a pacifist and he wasn't a radical. But, you know, any of you who've read Dr. King's works will tell you that he saw the world in a very specific way. And one of my favorite quotes is his, is never again can we afford to live with the narrow provincial outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its borders. So I think it's usually easier to start off by telling you guys a little bit about me. I was born in Iran in 1975. 2 years later, when I was a 2-year-old, my dad decided to move to the United States to get his PhD at Michigan State University. As most of you guys know, about 2 years later is when the revolution happened in Iran. And we were like, you know, America seems like a pretty cool place to hang out. And we decided to hang out here. I was raised in East Lansing, Michigan, as my dad got his PhD. And then when I was in second grade, I moved to Edwardsville, Illinois, then went to the University of Illinois. And then I went to Washington University School of Law. And at WashU, there was a program that allowed, well, my years at WashU were kind of crazy. While I was at WashU, Bush v. Gore happened. And during my last year at WashU, I applied to go to a program called the DC Clinic, where they have you spend your last semester working in Washington, DC. And I ended up getting chosen to work for Senator Jean Carnahan, whose husband had just died in a plane crash. And I went to interview for the position with the program. I got selected, and 2 days later, September 11th happened. And then the day that I went to interview with the senator is the day that the anthrax letters showed up 2 doors down to me. So I moved to DC in January of '02. And while I was there, I applied for a program called the Presidential Management Fellowship Program and was hired out of law school to work for the National Security Unit at the old INS, but eventually we all became the Department of Homeland Security. So I was the lead attorney for the National Security Law Division. And as Nicole said, we ended up using immigration laws, much like tax laws we use against Capone. We use immigration laws on any cases involving foreign nationals that have to do with terrorism or espionage or anything like that. After I left the government, I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times called "I Prosecuted Terrorists for President Bush. Now my family in Iran may be banned from visiting us." And in actuality, they were banned from visiting us. So if you Google my name in New York Times, you can read the op-ed. Let me just tell you guys a little bit, you know, and these stats are a little dated, but I can tell you that in 2016, there were 46 million immigrants, just plain immigrants in the United States. This doesn't count the people like me who are now US citizens. I would imagine in a group like yours, you're going to have many people whose families were immigrants within the last few generations. And see, I got my cup from McDonald's. That doesn't include, you know, their families and afterwards. In the immigration world, about 20 million immigration forms are filed a year, and about 1 million people become permanent residents. Permanent residents is also referred to as green card holders. That is the step that you have to take before you can become a citizen. And I'd like to kind of do a little bit of teaching and teach you a little bit about that. So I also like to throw out some stuff about what you hear in the press. So you hear things in the press like things that say that illegal immigrants are more likely to commit crimes than people who came to the US legally. That is absolutely true. People who enter America unlawfully do commit crimes at a higher rate than people like me who entered America lawfully. What they don't tell you is that people who enter the United States unlawfully still commit crimes at 40% of what people who were born in America do. An American citizen commits crimes 2.5 times more often than somebody who crossed the border unlawfully. And an American citizen compared to somebody like me who was a legal immigrant commits crimes 8 times as often. So it's a misnomer. So I like to bring out some myths about immigration. Give me a second. Number one, are immigrants taking over? Actually, immigrants actually only account for about 13% of our total population. Are immigrants all from Mexico? No, only 30% of our immigrants are from Mexico. Right now, Asia and China are increasing numbers. Immigrants don't work. Actually, immigrants work at 72.5%, which is actually at a higher rate than American citizens do. Immigrants, do they help the economy? Absolutely. Do they take American jobs? No. And they're actually, a higher percentage of them are self-employed. And when you start looking at Fortune 500, the number for each immigrant who becomes lawful, they help make 2.5 jobs. Are they on welfare? They're on welfare at about the same rate as US people. Are they not educated? Nope. Recent immigrants actually tend to have higher education levels than Americans. And where did I find out all of this biased, super liberal information? These last few slides are taken from the George W. Bush Presidential Center's website. So the idea that this is a biased set of facts, no, these are the real facts. Okay. So before we get into all this, though, we need to talk about how does somebody become a US citizen? There are various ways, but there are 3 main ways that people become US citizens. Most of my business is family-based immigration, like this picture in the upper left corner. Family-based immigration is when you apply for an immigrant benefit to get a green card based on a US relative who's either a permanent resident or a citizen. Another way to get your citizenship is if you are sponsored by your employer. And it's a really bizarre set of facts that allow this to happen. Most of the time, you have to be sponsored by your employer when you're involved in a high skill position. Computer programmers, doctors. The way that we came to America is my dad was getting his PhD and he became a professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and the university sponsored it. But one of the weird carve outs here is the professional athletes. I represent 2 Major League Baseball teams. We get citizenship for some of our big athletes, but also the group that falls into like scientists, athletes also includes models. So Melania Trump got to jump to the front of the line because she's a model. What it does not include is that there's no route here to get your citizenship if you're one of the really, really needed low skill workers. If you're somebody who works on a farm, if you're somebody who works in fast food, if you're somebody who's doing construction. Those are the 2 main. Now the third biggest group are people who either get asylum once they come into the United States or they get processed as refugees. The standards are fairly similar. It's for people who are persecuted, who can show that they've been persecuted or will be persecuted based on their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, even if it's imputed political opinion, and a squishier category called membership in a particular social group. The big difference, though, so you know, between asylum and refugee is asylum are people who are in the United States and apply for themselves. Refugees are people who are at refugee camps overseas and end up being processed by the United Nations. Okay. Hopefully, I'm not getting too much background noise because the restaurant is slowly beginning to fill up. Here's the first thing. If you look in your chat, I put 2 links. But if I were to tell you one takeaway from my talk today is I want you to write down 2 words. I want you to write down on a sheet of paper the words visa bulletin. The visa bulletin, when you do a search for it, is a State Department website that tells us how long this process takes. The thing that makes me lose my mind is whenever I hear people say, well, why didn't somebody just do it legally? Why didn't they just do everything right? All you got to do is fill out some forms. And that's totally wrong. I mean, as an example, when I got my green card in the 80s, the application was 4 pages long. Currently, when I file an application for somebody to get a green card, it's close to 80 pages of forms and usually 200 to 300 pages of evidence. But to get your green card in America based on a family process, there are 3 factors that are taken into account. The question is, who is your family member? Only 2 types of people can apply for somebody to get a green card, either a US citizen or a permanent resident. Think for a second, which one do you think the US prioritizes? US citizens. Their cases take longer. Good. The second factor is how closely related you are to the petitioner. US citizens can always apply for their minor children, their parents, and their spouses. Those, there's no backlog other than the 1 to 2 years to do the processing. But US citizens can also apply all the way out to their brothers and sisters. So the next question is, how long is the backlog? And the closer you're related to somebody, the shorter the process is. The third thing that is taken into account is what country you're from. There are quotas for how many people can enter the United States. And 4 countries have so many people who apply that they're on a separate track and it takes longer. And those are Mexico, mainland China, the Philippines, and India. So the reason that I tell you guys to write down the word visa bulletin is that when we do the visa bulletin, I'm actually going to jump out of this so we can do the live breakdown of this so we can see what it is today. When I say a visa bulletin, if you type visa bulletin into Google, you're going to eventually come to this page, which is the State Department's page that tells me how long this takes. And this is the February list. So the first thing that I tell people to look at is this thing right here, family sponsor. These are the only people who you can apply for. So when President Bush used to say people were bringing their aunts and uncles and nephews, it's a lie. It is literally an impossibility. And you can just look here. Here are the people who can come in. Your unmarried sons and daughters of a US citizen. And in immigration law, sons and daughters means people who are over 21. They're called children if they're less than 21. And they even break it down to whether or not they're married or not. Spouses and children of unmarried sons and daughters of permanent residents. Spouses and children of permanent residents. Unmarried sons and daughters. Married sons and daughters. And brothers and sisters. And why this is important is there's a chart that will tell me if I file one of these applications, how long it will be before the government will even look at it. So if I file for a US citizen for their spouse, the government will start to look at that immediately because there's never a backlog. But let's say I'm French and I marry an American citizen and I eventually become an American citizen. And I want to bring my 25-year-old daughter to America who's unmarried. Because in America, what we tell everybody is the most important thing to us is family, right? I want to bring my 25-year-old unmarried daughter because I'm a US citizen. I get to bring her. So she would be an unmarried son and daughter of the United States. And since I'm from France and we treat the white countries better, she's going to be in the better class. So let's look down on the chart. So she would be an F1. So she's an F1 from another country, not one of the 4 main ones. And if we look right here, we are processing applications that were filed in December 2014. But when people talk about, so we're talking about 7+ years to get my daughter. before they'll even look at the application, add another year. But that's not what people are talking about though. When you see in the news, people are talking about, I want those people to do this legally. They're talking about Mexicans. You know, that is the group that has been most vilified in this. So let's say that I'm a US citizen, I've done everything properly, and I am a Mexican, and I've lived here for years, I've done everything properly, I've paid all the fees, I've gone through all my security checks, and I want to bring my brother over to America. So we're going to talk about a brother and sister of an adult US citizen, and this is how you do it legally. And I'm from Mexico, and I want to come over here and work. What's that process take? So we come over here, we look at the Mexico row, and we go down to F4. We're processing applications that were filed this month. We're processing applications that were filed on April 22nd, 1999. On April 22nd, 1999, I weighed 100 pounds less. I had hair down to here, and I think I was ready to follow the Grateful Dead around America. The idea that this is a system that works, that anybody can use properly to bring people over is insane. So the reason I tell you guys to keep that visa bulletin on your phone is whenever you have a conversation with somebody who tells you, hey, I think that somebody should do this way or that way, you can just pop it up on your phone and show them how quickly and how ridiculous that is. Okay, I put a link to the visa bulletin in the chat, and there's also a link in the chat to a YouTube video. Because I'm here, I can't play this YouTube video for you because this YouTube video makes me lose my mind. One of the biggest things that we have here in the immigration debate, and it's not just the immigration debate, it is in the political debate in America, is that the left and the right have both become extreme. And to pardon my language, that is bullshit, okay? If you watch this video, and there's a YouTube clip, I would ask you all to just copy and paste it. This is 1980, and it is a presidential debate, Republican presidential debate between George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan. And the question that's proposed to them is, what do you think we should do about, and they use the pejorative term that I don't like, what should we do about the illegal alien problem on the border? And the answers are amazing. George H.W. Bush says, well, these are good people. These are people who are working hard. I can't even imagine treating their children worse than ours and making them feel like they don't belong here. They should get free schooling. They should get free health. They should get access to health care. They should be treated humanely. A lot of my family members are from Mexico. And then Ronald Reagan comes in. And you would expect Ronald Reagan, from everything you hear, to now go and say, George Bush, you're wrong. Instead, he doubles down. He says, first he takes a shot at Cuba for some reason. And then he goes, not only do I think that we need these people, we should open the border. And we should allow people from Mexico to freely come into the United States and work wherever they want. That position that George H.W. Bush, and before the cult of Donald Trump happened, the king of the Republican Party, Ronald Reagan, those two positions that they take are significantly left of the position that Bernie Sanders currently has. What has happened over the years is the Republican Party, especially on immigration, has gone way, 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 way far to the right. And they've pulled the Democrats towards the right. Where the Democrats currently are right now, and I'm not even talking about, I'm talking about where the Pelosi, Joe Biden Democrats are, it is way farther to the right than where George Bush and Ronald Reagan are. If you've got 2 minutes after this, you should listen to it, because your just mouth just drops and you're like, what the hell is happening? Okay, so let's talk about the good. I call it the good, the great, and the ugly. The changes from Joe Biden to Donald Trump. So when Donald Trump was president, he did a bunch of terrible things to immigration. One of the things is that there's a status called temporary protected status, where we protect people from countries that are going through unbelievable turmoil. And one of them is El Salvador. Donald Trump's people tried to cancel TPS to El Salvador. Joe Biden reversed that. Donald Trump also tried to make it so that when people file for asylum, mind you, these are people who are running for their lives, coming to a brand new country. He wanted to charge them thousands of dollars to file for asylum to prevent them from being able to do that. Joe Biden reversed that. Another thing that was done during the Trump administration that is crazy is that in immigration court, it's not real court. It's all within the Department of Justice. And within the Department of Justice, the head of the Department of Justice is the Attorney General. And the Attorney General has the ability to take immigration lawsuits and make his own decisions. And Jeff Sessions issued a decision in 2008 called Matter of AB. That was one of the most insane decisions that we have ever seen. And basically he said that people who are persecuted by, the case was a domestic violence case. And in this case, there was a woman who was beaten by her husband repeatedly. She reported it. Police said, there is nothing that we can do because in our country, you are your husband's property. So it wasn't just a woman who was beaten. It was a woman who could not avail herself of any protections from her government. And a judge had determined, yes, that is a particular social group and you are eligible for asylum. Well, then Jeff Sessions got the case and he issued a decision that says, nope, asylum doesn't apply to domestic violence cases. And then in one of the most crazy things that I've ever seen, he also said, it also doesn't apply to gangs, even though that wasn't even an issue in the case. Could you imagine if a liberal Supreme Court was listening to a case about Roe v. Wade, and they said, in the end, we think a woman has a right to choose. And by the way, even though nobody had anything to do with this, we're gonna ban guns. We're just gonna throw that in there. That's what he did here. So he basically said that domestic violence and running away from gangs were specifically targeting you, even if you show, you don't just say it, you prove with all of your evidence that this is happening to you. Sessions said, did not qualify. Merrick Garland as Attorney General has overturned this. Other things that happened. They put something forward called the public charge rule, which made it so that we had to prove that people who are coming to the United States could self-sustain themselves, even though the law said that they have to have a financial sponsor, and that's good enough. We got rid of that. We were banning diplomats from other countries from bringing their same-sex partners here, even if that country did not allow them to get married. We reversed that. Let's talk about the great. In May of 2021, ICE, which is the enforcement branch of the Department of Homeland Security, issued this memo called the Tresvenus memo. And what the Tresvenus memo said was that we, government, have limited capabilities. We have limited resources. So we are going to focus in our deportation cases on people who are violent criminals and people who are national security threats. If you're somebody who's been here for years and obeyed all of our laws and paid your taxes, not only are we not going to focus on you, we're going to close your cases. Okay? This was a huge deal because under the Trump administration, they were just deporting anybody they could get. As soon as they can get them, they tried to get them out of the country. This prioritized it, and this gives us, as an immigration attorney, the chance to go to the immigration and say, hey guys, this person isn't one of your factors. I would like for you to close the case. This has been in immigration court a game changer, where we're able to stop a lot of these processes. Now, a Republican administration could overturn this instantly. What are the other things that he's done? DACA, which is a program that is used to help kids who came over to the United States unlawfully when they were really young and have lived their whole life here. You know, some of them are 2, 3-year-olds who crossed the border and have been here for 25 years. Trump tried to get rid of it. Biden brought it back. The Muslim ban, which is what my New York Times op-ed was about, that was repealed. He revoked the extreme vetting program. He rescinded the idea that we weren't letting people in from countries that have high COVID rates, which was always crazy to me because we were like, said that all of these African countries, we're not going to let these people come in because they have high COVID rates, even though those countries had COVID rates that were 1/3 our own. And we talked about the public charge rate. So those are the good and the great. Now let's talk about the ugly. In immigration court, there are a bunch of terrible Trump immigration policies that the Biden administration is still defending. One of them is something called Title 42. Basically, the Trump administration decided to use COVID as a sword and said that in the past, what would happen is people would present themselves at the border. We would vet them to see if we thought that they had an asylum claim, and we would allow them to come in. Now we're stopping all these people. We're making them live in squalor in Mexico. Many of them are living in tents outside. People are getting kidnapped and held for ransom. Rape, terrible stuff is happening there. And Trump said we had to do that because these Mexicans are so dirty, and they're going to have, and Guatemalans and Nicaraguans, and they have so many diseases on them that we have to do this for a health reason. And Biden is in, and there were lawsuits filed before Biden became president, and those lawsuits are still going on. And the Biden administration is still defending those lawsuits to the point that this week, the congressional Democrats, especially the Black Caucus, led by my Congresswoman, Cori Bush, and by Senator Booker from New Jersey, have sent a letter to President Biden asking why this process is still going on, especially considering that it disproportionately hurts Black migrants, especially Haitians. It's really ugly. I do not know why some of the worst policies of Trump that Biden, I know why they're doing it. The Biden administration's position is, even if we disagree with these, we don't think the court should be able to tell us that we can't do it. So they're fighting to say the court doesn't have it. But I don't know why they don't just repeal it. So, and then the place where everything has gone to hell is our treatment of potential immigrants from Afghanistan. We originally were able to get about 70,000 out, and there are tens of thousands more. I don't know if you guys know Jason Kander. You know, Jason ran for US Senate. Jason, it was a Twitter thing. Jason had a family of people who worked for his interpreter that he was trying to get out. And Jason puts up on Twitter, I need an immigration attorney that can fight. And I never met Jason, and did one of the weirdest things, about 40 people tagged me on this thing, including people I didn't know. And then Jason and I become very good friends. And we started a nonprofit in DC called the Afghan Rescue Project. And we were able to get a plane of 270 Afghans privately evacuated out of the country to Albania, where they were supposed to be there temporarily. We've been paying for them with some very generous fundraising people to stay at a resort since September. And we've just hit a roadblock. Hillary Clinton has people in Albania. There's 2,500 people in Albania. There's thousands of other people who've gotten out. And we've just hit roadblocks with the Biden administration about what we can do with these families and bring them to America. And these are all families of people who served with our troops. And it's just stuck in bureaucracy. So that is kind of where we are on it. I would say, that's my last slide. I would say that things are 1 million times better in the immigration world since Biden has taken over compared to Trump. But there's so much stuff that he promised that could be done. And I get it, a lot of it you can't do when you've got 50 senators and you've got a break, but there's a lot more that could be done. And I think we're all very disappointed in there, and we would want people to continually to push, say, this is what we demand, just as an example, so you can see, the 1995 was the most active year America had in repatriating Vietnamese refugees after the Vietnam War. 20 years later, right? This process of bringing Afghans over is going to be going on for at least a decade. With that, hopefully everybody could hear me and this McDonald's wasn't too loud. I don't know how you guys want to do this with questions, but I've got like 10 or 15 minutes to take questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Maureen, will you unmute and ask your question, please?
Oh, before Maureen, I will,
Yeah.
Marilyn asked a question about the slides.
Sure.
Sometime this weekend, I'll turn the slides into a PDF and I'll flip them to the sponsors. And if they want to send them out to you, that's great.
My question is this: we had a review with our financial consultant. He always does a state of the economy and, of course, jobs that are not filled. And he said that under the Trump administration, we have 1.1 million immigrants less, and that if we boosted our immigration, we could solve the problem we have with filling positions. But I don't see
Absolutely.
people talking about that, and it's a really sound idea to really help our economy. So how do we deal with this, and is anybody talking about it?
If people in the immigration world are, but this one topic of immigration has become just so politicized and so vitriolic that nobody wants to talk about it as an advantage. But absolutely, when you start talking about the industries right now that are most affected by, I think there's two things that we're not talking about. I think it's the combination of the cut down of immigrants who are in the United States. Add that to, we're about 1 million COVID deaths, okay? And not just 1 million COVID, that's reported deaths. That's not, we're probably at a factor of 2 to 3 on that with long COVID types of people that have had injuries that have taken them out of the workforce. The places that right now economically that we're in the worst shape are the service industry, are farms, are the lower wage workers. That's where recent immigrants and immigrants who are undocumented work the most. There's an economic study I read a long time ago that says the most beneficial, the most productive person for the American economy is not a CEO, is not a lawyer like me, isn't a doctor. It is an undocumented Mexican male. Because the amount of work that they do for the little tiny amounts of money that they get is hugely beneficial to us. But yes, absolutely. I'm sitting in a McDonald's right now where there's clearly not enough workers. I'm sure I can go to Juarez right now and get 10 people who come here for $12 an hour and work their butts off. That's a great point. I think I've got a question from Peggy.
Right, and be sure to scold me if I ask a question that was answered before I was able to get on the screen. But I would appreciate hearing what the legal obstacles are. What do the newcomers to St. Louis from Afghanistan, what's the legal path that they have to take? International Institute says that they need help with these legal issues, but what are those legal issues?
So I'm on the board for the International Institute. I'm one of the boards. So hopefully this will be fixed soon, okay? Remember how I showed you that chart? I mean, the pictures about the 3 main ways to come to America: family, through employment, or through asylum, okay? As of right, if these people had been processed as refugees overseas, like our Bosnians were. Now, the Bosnians spent years and years in refugee camps. But what happens is when you come into the United States as a refugee, you're automatically put on a path towards a green card. 1 year later, you can apply for your green card, right? There is something called the Afghan Adjustment Act in front of Congress right now that we think has bipartisan support. And what that would do is treat all of the Afghans who've come to the United States through these organizations like the International Institute exactly the same as a refugee. So 1 year from now, they could apply for green cards, and our firm and other ones could help them with that. And then 5 years later, they could apply for citizenship. Okay? But without that passing, the only choice is to file individual asylum claims for each of these people. And an individual asylum claim has to be filed within 1 year of being in the United States. And these are slam dunk cases, right? But for me to put together an asylum application for somebody takes about 60 hours of work. It's a lot of work. For me to just fill out a green card application for a refugee takes about 2 hours. And right now, I have asylum cases right now that I filed that were 5 years waiting for an initial interview. We don't have an asylum office in St. Louis. There's an asylum office in Chicago, and before COVID, 4 times a year, they would send officers to St. Louis to interview people. They haven't sent any people in 2 years. So if the Afghan Adjustment Act happens, we can make this a much easier process. Okay. If it doesn't happen, then it's going to be asylum. It's going to be thousands of hours of work, and it's going to take years and years to do this while these people are in limbo. So it's got to be the Afghan Adjustment Act.
So how about something as simple as when the time comes, getting a driver's license? Is that a legal
No,
issue?
It is a legal issue. So, but this is a weird legal and state issue. Okay, if you live in Illinois, regardless of your immigration status, if you physically lived in Illinois for 1 year, you can get a temporary driver's license. You can renew it every single year ad infinitum. Missouri's laws are very archaic. Not only do you have to have a document showing that you have something that's been granted to you, but you also have to use the original document. So most of these people, until we get some kind of benefit for them, can't get driver's licenses. Now, if they were properly paroled, I haven't dealt with that with the Afghan population. I have dealt with it in my undocumented population, and in Missouri, it's almost impossible. And this goes to another question, kind of like what Maureen was talking about earlier. That's insane. Okay, for me, if I like to look things through the most conservative eyes. Okay, if I'm a guy driving my pickup truck in Farmington, Missouri, and I get into a car accident, do I care what the other person's immigration status is, or do I want them to have car insurance? Right? I want them to have car insurance. It's better for me if they have car insurance. Why would we come up with a system where these people they have to drive? We don't have good public transportation in this state. We need them to work. Why wouldn't we do that? So Missouri, it's very, very difficult to get a driver's license. The Afghan Adjustment Act, if it happens, and the problem is the Republicans often do not want to give the Biden administration any wins, but it's supposed to be fast tracked, and we might get a vote on it within the next 1 or 2 months. Somebody said that they have a problem with calling Afghans parolees. Yeah, it's weird because the process that we use to allow them in is called parole, but you're used to hearing parolee as somebody who's out of jail. The other thing, lexicon is important. One very important thing from somebody in my group is there are people here who have no documentation. It's not the best phrase, but talk about people without documents or the undocumented or people who have entered America illegally. I'm actually okay with that. What we need to avoid is terms like illegal immigrants, the illegals. The other one that's very weird to me, and I'll tell you one just quick story, so why I find it hilarious, is that a term that we use all the time is aliens. It's the Immigration Nationality Act, and they're aliens, foreign aliens, right? Just a weird phrase. And I was doing a trial when I was a prosecutor in Arlington, Virginia, with this Japanese woman, and she was very young, very attractive, very well dressed, and she was up there and I'm like doing this case and she's applying for asylum. I'm like, I don't understand, right? But she's like, yes, my husband was arrested by the Japanese government and he was eventually killed and they were persecuting him because he was an alien. I was like, oh, what country was he from? She's like, oh, no, my husband was from outer space. And it was if you look it up, you can find it. There was a cult in Japan that was involved in like bombing their subway system that all believed that they were from outer space, that her husband was a cult leader and she'd come to America. I was like, I'm okay with you using alien there. Like that's a better use of alien than what I'm used to. So, yeah. What other questions? Who's got another one for me? Are we good? Oh, I think I've got a question up here with Diana. Go ahead and unmute.
Yes, unless I missed it, what hope is there that we can change our system enough so that people don't have to wait 20 years to become citizens?
So one of my mentors, one of the greatest people that you guys would know, and he's a St. Louis Jew, Steve Legowski. He was a professor of mine at law school, and when he was in during the Obama administration, he was the chief counsel for one of the immigration groups, and he was involved. There is a bill that the Democrats have drafted, fully done, that will comprehensively fix all of this. Okay, we got to get rid of the filibuster. We pick up 2 seats in the U.S. Senate, it happens. We net 2 seats in the U.S. Senate, it will happen. But without the filibuster, it's not happening. And it's this very bizarre political world right now, where there's certain things that both the Democrats and the Republicans agree on. And here's the really interesting thing: when you talk about DACA, protecting these kids who've been here for years and years, it's got like 90% approval among Democrats and like 75% approval among Republicans. But the issue is politically, there are a few things that both the Democrats and the Republicans agree on. The Republicans every so often offer to do them up piecemeal. But the Democrats know if we do 1 or 2 of those that are piecemeal, that are popular, then these other things that we need to do that just the public doesn't understand will never, ever happen. So the question is, how do you do that? But yeah, give me 2 seats in the US Senate. You give me 2 progressives in the US Senate, you get done tomorrow.
I have a question. Just thinking about what you just mentioned about the percentage of people who support DACA and other bills, it kind of reminds me of how 90% of Americans support universal background checks for gun purchases, and even 75% of NRA members. Are there powerful groups like the NRA that are fighting against immigration policy? And is there? Could you tell us who they are, and if we can?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's not where it's different, where it's not a lobbyist group. Like even the Chamber of Commerce is pro-immigration. Where it is what we have learned over the years is that the Republican Party has go-tos, okay, that they need to vilify. When George W. Bush was running against Al Gore, it was the gays. Oh my God, the gays. Everyone's going to catch the gay. We're all going to become gay. Then when Donald Trump, it became the dirty, illegal immigrants. It's just a thing for them. I mean, right now, I'm 46 years old, right? I've used public restrooms a million times in my life. I've never had a problem with running into a transgender person who's trying to cause me problems, right? Apparently there is a phenomenon of crazy transgender people in bathrooms that's happening to millions of people, according to what we hear in the news, right? It's a cudgel. It's a cudgel, it is the you know, to put it into a, you know, something relative to your group, is how often that's all of a sudden the Jews in the media or the financial, and you know, like everybody knows when you see something on TV and they talk about George Soros, what they're really talking about. You know, it's just, it's, you know, it's all popular except for it's something that they can use, and it's so vilified right now that you're not going to get any of them. You can't even get Mitt Romney on board with this stuff. Like, it's nuts. You know,
Are there any
I mean,
other
if you
questions?
really want, I'll just do my other thing to say, you know, there are rules about immigration. One of them is when you're here on a visitor visa, you're not allowed to work. Okay. There are thousands of pictures of Melania Trump working in the modeling industry while she was here on a visitor visa. And then apparently she's the right kind of immigrant, you know? So, yep. Anything else for me? Thanks, Francine.
Thank you
All right.
so much.
I will
This
make
was
one.
terrific.
I will
Oh,
make
yeah, go ahead.
one final. I'll make one final plug. Okay. In the St. Louis area, which I consider for immigration purposes, you're basically looping up to Springfield, Illinois, down to Carbondale, down to the eastern side of the whole state, up through Columbia and back. There are 6 low bono or pro bono immigration attorneys who cover that whole area. Okay. There are 2 unbelievable women who left. They graduated from WashU Law School and social work, and they started a group called the MICA Project, MICA. If this is the type of stuff that interests you and that you want to support financially, the 2 groups that are doing God's work on this are the MICA Project and the International Institute. And, you know, you guys should support them.
And speaking of that, we have made a donation in your honor to the MICA group, to the MICA Project, for thanking you for doing this today, especially since your trip got kind of upended and you're on the road in this crazy weather.
The kids, except for the kids, think like being inside at a McDonald's is like, we haven't done this in 2 years. This is
Yeah.
crazy.
Right,
So they're bouncing around. So.
right, exactly.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And
You're so welcome.
I will get a copy of the PDF out, and it'll have my contact info in it. And feel free, you know, if you've got immigrants that need help, reach out to us.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Javad.
Careful driving. The weather is awful.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And for
Thanks, guys.
and I'm about to send out a link to the sorry, my brain's a little mushy today. An evaluation, if you would be so kind as to fill that out. We are always looking to improve our programming. Not that this needed to be improved upon because it was fabulous, but or ideas. So please fill that out when you get a chance. And again, please join us next month on the 24th to hear from Ashton from the Sierra Club, who's going to talk about the initiative petition situation in Missouri right now. Nicole, do you have anything else to add before we log off?
No, I just want to thank, you know, Javad so much for being here, and it was a wonderful presentation, Javad.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having
Thank
me.
you for sharing the slides.
Thank you.
Bye.